Hey everyone, it's David. Most of you know me as the father here at As Father and Son, and I just wanted to give a quick introduction to this essay that you're about to listen to because I wrote and recorded the audio for it about a year ago. So it was a month or so after the Rise of Skywalker had come out, and Timothy and I had already seen it like 7 times or something. But during that time frame, Timothy and his wife were expecting their first baby in March, and things were getting really hectic in his life. So Timothy is our video editor, producer, content creator extraordinaire. And when I finished the recording of this essay and handed it off to him, things like making Star Wars videos for YouTube were just not the priority in his life. And then on March the 2nd, his life changed in the best way with the birth of his son. So naturally, this essay was put on hiatus while Timothy learned how to be a dad to a newborn baby and all that comes with that, like dirty diapers and no sleep and a lot of crying. The baby cried a lot too. Something else that was happening during that time in March of 2020 was this global pandemic was shutting down the world. And so Timothy and I couldn't get together and do our normal AsFast thing on a regular basis. So our content on our channel went down to almost nothing for last year. So here we are 1 year later, and we still had this essay I had written just sitting on the back burner. Now, originally, the idea was to make a video essay like we usually do with all the ideas that we put in, and we usually have video footage and audio clips, and I had notes on all the things I wanted to use, all the usual visual wisecracks that, content creators out there, takes hours and hours to put all of that stuff together and to edit it in there seamlessly and make it work. And since it's already been a year, and it would still take all that time to do, Timothy and I agreed to just have this be an audio-only essay of just me speaking. Because of that, there are moments in there where you might hear me doing Darth Vader's voice when it was supposed to be footage of Darth Vader saying the line. There's also a moment of me doing a really bad impersonation of Jim Carrey's version of The Grinch for a line that I was pulling from that movie. And a couple times I wanted to use Ron Howard's narrator voice from Arrested Development. He didn't. So all the things we normally do for gags and things that we do in our AsFast, it's our As Father and Son shtick. But this audio-only version will be more like a podcast. So you can just turn it on. You don't have to worry about watching 28 minutes of video. Just turn it on and listen to it while you do something else. Now, one last thing before we start the essay. Since this was recorded a year ago and it's about the Rise of Skywalker, truly it's actually about the Sequel Trilogy as a whole since it came to an end, I do hit on some sour notes that had been expressed during that time frame and are still being expressed to this day. So when I listened to it again, I wondered if maybe I was being too harsh in places, or maybe I came across as too judgmental towards a certain section of the fandom's viewpoints. But I left it all in there because it is what it is. I said what I said, and I meant it at that time. Now, I'm always open to learning and growing and being willing to admit when I'm wrong. But I'm also open to healthy conversation about differing opinions. So if you disagree with me, that's cool. I just hope that we can agree to disagree and still be civil to each other. So bear that in mind as you listen, and I really hope that you enjoy this essay that I called Identity and Choice in Star Wars. Hi, it's David, the father here at AsFast, and I want to share with you some of my thoughts on the Rise of Skywalker, the Sequel Trilogy, and the state of our fandom. I have a lot to say, so without further ado, I'll say it. So it seems to me that too many people went to see the Rise of Skywalker as an adult. I went as my 10-year-old self who loved all things Star Wars and still does, and I came out loving it the same way that 10-year-old little me would have loved it. Are there flaws in it? Yes. Were there moments that subverted my expectations? Thankfully, yes. There's a natural tendency towards a false sense of ownership within the Star Wars fandom. I remember that feeling as a kid that Star Wars was created just for me and my little brother, and that it was more special to us than to anyone else out there. But if I can coin a new term here, it's a false sense of entitlement expectation that kills the true spirit of being a fan. I'll try to explain what I mean by that. When I first saw Star Wars in 1977, I had no expectations at all, besides what little I'd seen of TV spots. My first memory of Star Wars was seeing a clip on Siskel and Ebert of the Falcon, where we see the cockpit view of them coming out of hyperspace. The images of hyperspace and the blurring of the stars are forever imprinted on my brain. Going to see the movie later that summer was thrilling, and I had no expectations that would later be subverted because I had no preconceived notions or pre-existing terms upon which the filmmakers were required to adhere to. Hearing that said out loud sounds ludicrous, but it is the world we live in now. Or at least, some people live that way. Anyway, I only knew that the spaceship scene looked exciting and I loved anything to do with space and spaceships. I was 8, or maybe still 7. I don't know if we saw Star Wars before my 8th birthday or after. Come on, that was 42 years ago. What I do know for sure is that I was not going to the theater expecting the movie to do what I wanted it to do. I went in with a clean slate, and I got more than I could have ever dreamed. And for each subsequent movie, it was basically the same thing. Now sure, my brother and our friends, we were all playing Star Wars on the playground at school, and then again when we got home, and making up our own adventures in between films. I was always Han Solo, and my brother was Chewie, and our best friend was Luke. He had a sister, so naturally she was Leia. We spent hours and hours making blaster sounds, which for us was more of a choo-choo than a pew-pew, but whatever. There was lots of lightsaber fighting with metal rods or broom handles or sticks or just whatever we could find. I would fill in as Darth Vader for the duels with Luke. But when it came time to sit in the darkened theater and see all our hopes fulfilled, it was again with a clean slate. And we never left disappointed. We left exhilarated and awed. Even at 13 years old, when Return of the Jedi introduced spear-wielding murder teddy bears called Ewoks, my newly teenage brain might have thought that was a bit too kiddie. But instead, I laughed and had a blast with that whole forest battle scene, even when Chewie did the Tarzan call. Han and Chewie and Luke and Leia were my heroes, and they seemed so real to me back then. I sat intensely worried that Luke would succumb to the dark side, and I remember clenching my hands on the armrest when the Emperor tempted Luke, and I even said out loud, "No, Luke, don't give in to hate." Some 40 years later, in this over-entertained society, there are folks who don't go into a film with a clean slate, ready to soak up whatever story unfolds before their eyes. They have a pre-existing expectation that had better be met or else. And in my mind, that false sense of ownership, that entitlement expectation, kills the true heart of being a fan. Blaming the storyteller for not telling the story you wanted seems, well, pretentious and entitled. In my opinion, it means that you've lost the childlike wonder of a clean slate. Now, I know this from personal experience because I had to overcome that myself in 1999 when I took my then 6-year-old son Timothy to see The Phantom Menace on opening night, and for the midnight showing no less, a first for both of us. To be fair, I'd become an adult and had entered parenthood thinking that Star Wars was done. I knew about all the things George had said through the years about 9 films and then 6 films, or was it 12? But I never thought that it would ever happen. I raised little baby Timothy on the original trilogy, like any good OT father would, and he was as enamored with it all as I was. And then the announcement came of the prequel trilogy, and I was ecstatic. Finally, we'll get to see how Anakin Skywalker became Darth Vader. My younger brother and I spent hours talking about the things that we hoped for in this new film. One of the main things we wanted to see was the Millennium Falcon in action again, and for it to have some tie-in to Anakin. We thought that it would give more meaning to Vader's obsession with the Falcon in Empire. I want that ship. And for it to actually have been his ship when he was a young hotshot pilot. It was the seed of an unrealistic expectation that we'd planted in our own entitlement expectation of what the story beats should be. That was just one of the many theories that we bounced around, but in general, we had in our minds an idea of what Star Wars was and what the prequels should tell us. George went elsewhere with it. We came out of The Phantom Menace scratching our heads like so many others of our generation. However, 6-year-old little Timothy came out buzzing with excitement after a midnight showing at 2 a.m. So he was quoting Jar Jar and making lightsaber sounds and talking about the pod race. And I realized that Star Wars was still Star Wars. His first theater experience of a Star War was as impactful as mine with the original. The disappointment I felt was lessened a little by how much he loved it, but I still struggled with it for a few years. Knowing that it was meant for kids, but also knowing that the original trilogy still had really impactful moments for adults too. And to me, The Phantom Menace was missing this element.
That said, I never once felt that George had ruined my childhood, and I certainly wasn't outraged. When I saw reports of that very sentiment in the news and online, I was shocked at the backlash and hate of what amounted to some really immature folks. Now, I personally did feel that George had lost his way a little bit with regard to what Star Wars really was to that first generation of fans. But regardless, it was his to do with what he wanted. It was mine to only enjoy the ride, or not. After all, Star Wars is supposed to be fun, right? That's what it's all about. That's what it's always been about. Having said all of this, I do try to be empathetic towards those who feel let down by a current Star Wars movie. I know how sad I would be if I hadn't connected to the sequel trilogy the way I have, but I would have moved on and still continued to enjoy the original trilogy and the prequel trilogy as much as I can. Okay, bear with me please, as I get on a bit of a soapbox here for a minute. What gives me pause in the current state of the fandom are folks who are outraged by Star Wars not going the way they wanted it to. In many cases, I feel like you did that to yourselves. Now hang on, don't hit the stop button just yet. I ask that you just hear me out. If you have become a vitriolic, venom-spewing hater of the franchise and anyone who loves it, then you have no one to blame for that but yourself. Okay, now hit the stop button if you aren't willing to hear me out further. Still there? Okay, good. I hope we can all agree that Star Wars is for entertainment purposes, period. If it no longer entertains you, then find something else that does. If you chose to join a section of the fandom that's sole purpose is to detract from the Disney era and to jump into online conversations just to be contentious, then you're no longer a fan of Star Wars in my eyes. If you make it your personal passion to dive headfirst into the river toxicity just to inform everyone that you're anti-Disney or Star Wars is ruined, then you need to come to terms with not being a fan of it anymore. The word fan is short for the word fanatic. A fanatic is someone who loves the franchise as a whole and is able to accept that some of it just isn't for them. And there's nothing wrong with that. You can still be a fan of the Star Wars things that you do connect with. Watch the OT, the PT, the Clone Wars, Rebels, The Mandalorian, Resistance, or read a Legends EU novel and just enjoy the things that do make you happy. Life is too short and too fragile to spend your breath on being a hater, especially a hater of something that you say you loved as a kid. I'll give you yet another personal example. Our family loves the Toy Story franchise. It came out when Timothy was the perfect age for it. He was basically Andy, and the film seemed to be chronological with his actual age in relation to Andy. The third film came out as he graduated high school and was preparing for college, just like Andy. Toy Story 3 impacted his mother, his sister, and me, and him too, in a very emotional way. That trilogy is perfect to us. Although, we would have kept the toys to save for Andy's kids someday. When the announcement of Toy Story 4 came out, we were excited. However, we had some expectations that we hoped would be met, mainly that Andy would be in it and somehow get those toys back so he could give them to his own kids someday, which is silly in hindsight. Or is it? I sat through that fourth movie with such disappointment. The main characters, who had previously all had great character development through 3 films, were not at all the same as Toy Story 3 left them. They felt off, which I think was the point to this story, but I just wasn't connecting with it at all. And then to see Woody trampled on, that was so disheartening. Again, probably the point, I know. But for Buzz to not really feel sure of himself and basically not know who he truly is as a character and to need some subconscious to guide him, that just really fell flat for me. For 3 films, Buzz grew as a character and found his purpose, but this 4th film discounted all of that to me. I'm very aware that this sounds like folks who didn't like Luke's treatment in The Last Jedi, and like them, I left Toy Story 4 sad and angry. But I have never once voiced that on any social media. I didn't start a #NotMyBuzz campaign on Twitter. In fact, this is the first time I've ever said anything about it online, because I decided to just love and enjoy the 3 films that I did connect with, and not give the new film any further thought. My whole family felt the same, and we didn't buy it on DVD. We have no plans to watch it again. The trilogy is enough for us, and it's not ruined. Now, my aforementioned younger brother, he has a young son, and he said that the both of them enjoyed Toy Story 4. And you know what? I'm happy that they can enjoy it and would never try to talk them out of that. If you love it too, then I'm happy for you. My expectations were not met, and it's kind of my own fault. Though I do feel that the choices made in 4 were bad choices that didn't grow the characters, because to me the theme of the Toy Story trilogy was that the toys knew their ultimate purpose was to be a child's plaything, and nothing was more important than that child's happiness. Toy Story 4 changed that, and, well, not in a good way for me. Now, you may wholeheartedly disagree and totally love that Woody left the rest of the gang behind and is out rescuing lost toys with a badass Bo Peep. I didn't care for it, so I've moved on. Speaking of moving on, I think it's time I stepped off that particular soapbox now and back onto the original one that I started on. Some of the best themes in Star Wars are hope, destiny, saving the ones you love, self-sacrifice for the greater good. The original trilogy was rife with those themes. So was the prequel trilogy. But Anakin fell short and was seduced by the dark side to achieve the things that he wanted. The sequel trilogy carries on with those same themes, and it enhances 2 important underlying aspects from both previous trilogies: identity and choice. From the get-go, The Force Awakens builds mystery around Rey's identity. In the original trilogy, Luke's identity is laid out, but his hero's journey is also about him finding his true self, his Force abilities, and fulfilling some greater destiny. Rey's journey is more complicated because of her abandonment issues. She thinks she has to sit and wait for someone to come back for her. So she is not seeking to leave as Luke was seeking to in A New Hope and go find her destiny. She wants what she thought was her identity, her family, to come back and get her. And only then will she find fulfillment and live happily ever after. But she learns a truth along the way that the belonging that you seek is not behind you, it is ahead. And she begins to accept that going back to Jakku is not the right path. In The Last Jedi, Rey is still seeking, hoping that the man, the myth, the legend, Luke Skywalker, will help her figure out what to do with this ability that has awakened in her, and to make sense of it all. He didn't. So she leaves disappointed and still seeking, but with a new focus on the shape of what she saw when she and Ben touched hands. There is still light in him. She's now convinced that Ben is going to be the one to help her with this awakening. So instead of heading back to Finn, Leia, and the Resistance, she goes to Kylo Ren, believing that when the moment comes, he'll be the one to turn to the good side. He didn't. Again, she leaves disappointed. So she returns to Finn, Leia, and the Resistance and helps them get away while the man, the myth, the legend, Luke Skywalker, having finally come to his Jedi senses, creates a distraction for them in the most awesome display of Jedi awesomeness that we have ever seen on screen or any written page. So awesome, it took all of his life force to achieve it. He did this knowingly, which is the ultimate in self-sacrifice, and cemented him as the true legend that the galaxy needed. Rey and Leia both sensed his becoming one with the Force with peace and purpose, not sadness or pain. Peace and purpose. But even after that, Rey still struggles with disappointment as she holds the broken lightsaber hilt and we hear Leia's comforting words, "We have everything we need." I don't think she was talking about everything they needed to rebuild a lightsaber. She meant all of them there, at that moment, on the Millennium Falcon, that core group, that family willing to stick together and make a stand. That belonging that Rey had been seeking was right there. No longer behind her, no longer ahead, right there. They were there for her, and now she was there for them. In The Rise of Skywalker, we see Rey's continued journey, but she no longer seeks belonging. She has a found family that loves her and a purpose of her own to become a Jedi and be worthy of that now repaired lightsaber. She is seemingly resolved that Kylo is her enemy and must be defeated. Then they learn of the Emperor's return, and the adventure begins. The film is fast-paced and takes us on a wild ride that for some people seems to lack the depth of previous installments. But when we look beneath the surface, there's so much more to this adventure flick. The themes of identity and choice are put to the test. After the events of The Last Jedi, Rey, as well as many fans, yours truly included, had come to terms with her being Rey from nowhere. and not attached to the legends of the galaxy far, far away. Suddenly, Kylo Ren throws a huge Kowalkian monkey lizard wrench. Did I say that correctly? Kowalkian. Huge Kowalkian monkey lizard wrench into things when he reveals Palpatine's dark secret of Rey's true heritage. In all honesty, I sat there in that comfy leather recliner theater chair for a few seconds, numbly processing this unexpected information. At that moment, I could have made the choice to get angry, roll my eyes, and let myself be taken out of the story altogether and lose focus. But it only took a few seconds for my 10-year-old clean slate self to think to himself, "Oh, wicked, Palpatine's granddaughter. I wonder what's going to happen next." And like my hero Han Solo, I was right back in the mess again and having fun. Later, when Luke confirmed that Kylo was not lying to Rey about it, I was already on board, and I couldn't wait to see it unfold. Rey had just received worse news than being a nobody with abandonment issues. All she ever wanted was to find her real family, and when she finally does, it's worse than her worst nightmare. She was from the most evil bloodline the galaxy had ever known, and on top of that, her evil grandfather had her parents murdered. Parents that did not, in fact, abandon her, but were hiding her to protect her from that evil bloodline. That is a lot more to overcome than Rey from nowhere. The shock of it saturates her being with anger and thoughts of revenge, which leads her once again face to face with Kylo Ren. The watery Death Star 2 duel wears each of them down, and Kylo Ren clearly bested Rey, but at the moment he could end her life, he hesitates and is distracted. Rey, in her anger, finally strikes a killing blow to her enemy with his own weapon, then immediately has regret when she senses that Leia was there with them on DS2, whispering in her son Ben's ear. When she comes to her senses, Rey does what Rey always does. She shows compassion. She uses some of her own life force to heal Ben, not only healing his physical wounds and the scars that she herself previously inflicted in The Force Awakens, but it causes an emotional healing as well. She tells him that she did want to take his hand, Ben's hand, and she does something not so characteristic of Rey. She runs away to hide. Something she picked up from some Jedi or other along the way who had done the same. Her raw emotions coursing through her veins with the knowledge that the blood in those veins was derived in ancient evil. Seemingly her only resolve is to hide away like Master Luke, and that will protect the galaxy from her. Thankfully, Luke tells her that he was wrong, something that everyone who was paying attention to The Last Jedi already knew. He tells her that he and Leia knew who she was, but that Leia saw her heart, something that proves that her parents succeeded in protecting her, because the good person that she truly is was intact, and any link to evil was prevented from tapping into her power and contaminating her. Her story arc in the previous two films comes full circle and establishes even more powerfully what we already knew about this strong female character, that no matter what is thrown at her, she will adapt and make the most of a bad situation. Her character growth has now flourished in her resolve to go and confront fear, to face an ancient evil that she is tied to, but it is not who she is. She is still Rey from nowhere who lived her life feeling abandoned. Rey, who sensed an awakening and a flicker of hope that perhaps she was part of a grander story and had a place in it. Rey, who looked into a Force mirror cave expecting to find heritage and finding only herself again, alone. Rey, who was told that she was no one, nothing, with no place in this story. That is who she came to terms with when she chose her found family. And the new information didn't erase all of that development in her story. It compounded it and stirred up an inner conflict like she had never known. But amid that conflict, something powerful happened. The girl from nowhere, who had raised herself alone, had another awakening. Some things are stronger than blood. It didn't matter what her heritage actually was, nobody from nowhere, or evil Sith bloodline, because she'd already chosen to be who she was, and nothing could change that. And now she chooses to fulfill her destiny, the destiny of all Jedi, to confront fear. With her own sense of peace and purpose, she races out to that destiny, while also leaving a trail of breadcrumbs for her friends. When she arrives, she declares what is the very antithesis to her fear. All you want is for me to hate, but I won't. Not even you. That is who Rey is. From the first moment we laid eyes on her in The Force Awakens all the way through The Last Jedi and into The Rise of Skywalker, Rey exemplifies compassion for others. She won't allow herself to be consumed with hate. Everything that happens next leads Rey to fulfilling the destiny of a Jedi. At the point that all hope seems lost, she connects with the Jedi who've gone before in one of my new favorite moments in all of Star Wars. Be with me. Be with me. And then as those Jedi tell her to rise, she stands in the Force with all of the Jedi in her. When she defeats her grandfather, it is not with hatred. In that moment, Rey uses the Force to reflect all of Sidious's hatred back at him and destroys his evil essence forever. For those keeping track and already typing in the comments, but Palps wanted her to kill him so he could blah blah. Let me be clear. Rey did not strike him down as he wanted her to in the Sith ritual, where he could then transfer his life essence into her. She defended herself from his attack and used the Force to push back all of his malice back onto him, which was more than he was ready for. His own hubris and his own hatred devoured him. Rey restored the balance as Anakin did, but the effort it took was more than Rey's physical body could handle. Now, initially, I had typed out that Rey sacrificed herself here, but the more I thought about it, I don't think she knew this would happen. It's not something Rey gave any thought to or even had time to think about. She reacted instinctively and did what needed to be done. You could have heard a pin drop in that packed theater house we were in that night. But as Ben slowly climbed out of that pit, the air filled the room again. And like his uncle Luke, Ben Solo did something so awesome it took all of his life force to achieve it. This he did knowingly, which again is the ultimate in self-sacrifice. It's worth noting here that his mother did the same. Leia also used her life force to connect with Ben on the Death Star remains, and she held on with him until he sacrificed himself in this moment. Then they are both released into the cosmic force as their bodies in unison fade from this crude matter into the luminous with peace and purpose. Now, I've talked about a lot here, more than I initially intended. There's still so much to delve into. How did Palpatine return? This whole dyad thing. Kylo's journey from Ren back to Ben. The Han Solo memory moment. Dad, I know. Man, I sobbed. And that kiss. But plus, I could go on and on and on about the found family dynamic with Rey, Finn, and Poe, and that heartwarming, tear-inducing embrace at the end. We'll do another video on those things at some point. This video was to explore the overall themes of family and sacrifice, and of identity and choice. Identity and choice. That final scene on Tatooine resolved those themes beautifully for Rey. After everything that Rey has been through, and all she learned of her heritage, she makes a choice. She chooses her family name, not the one she was born with. It meant nothing to her. Rey chooses to be a Skywalker. In a recent interview, Ray Carson, the author who wrote the novelization of The Rise of Skywalker, said this, quote, Rey rejects everything about him and takes on the Skywalker mantle and legacy. In the end, it's a Palpatine who turns to the light, thus handing the Skywalkers their ultimate victory, end quote. The sequel trilogy, and Star Wars as a whole for that matter, is about making choices. Just like in real life, we as fans choose how we react to this art that we love and are sometimes disappointed with. I'm not saying that we all have to agree. No, we don't. That's what makes us individuals. But our love for this one thing makes us part of a larger community, a community that, sadly, sometimes eats its own. We have to choose to be better than this. Timothy and I have many online mutuals that we don't always see eye to eye with, but we respect their opinions. It's rare to find anyone that you 100% agree with. To our surprise, we have found one example where this has happened. We discovered another fan's article on his blog site, and it was as if either of us could have written every single word. Jared Kozal gave us permission to put a link to his blog in our description. It's about how he learned to stop worrying and love what he loves even when others may not. We encourage you to click on the link and read it. You may not agree with everything that he says the way that we do, but his opinions deserve your respect and are worth reading. We need peace in this community. I hope we can all agree on that. As I bring this to a close, I want to ask you something. What age were you when you first saw Star Wars? If you were a kid, do you remember how it made you feel? Next question. What age were you when you stopped watching Star Wars as that little kid? If Star Wars makes you angry now, ask yourself if you're watching it as an adult with adult expectations or as that little kid you were when you first saw it with a clean slate. I'll leave you with one final summation of what I've learned from this 9-film saga, this trilogy of trilogies. It doesn't matter where you came from, whether it was from nowhere, legendary blood, or an ancient evil. It only matters who you choose to be. May the Force be with you.
Did I do it? Is that good? I think I did it. I think I'm done. I did it. I mean, there was a couple of flubs, but we can let them go, right? I don't know. I'm about to listen and see. You may never see this. It may get deleted. Let's find out.